I still remember the precise second the room stopped feeling warm. It was Christmas Eve, and the dining room glowed the way magazines promise families are supposed to glow. Amber light from the chandelier, polished silverware reflecting soft laughter, my parents playing their roles with practiced ease. My mother's laugh rang too bright. My father's stories stretched too long. Everything about the night felt staged, like a photo shoot where no one blinked at the wrong moment. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment like this. Your like and share can carry this story to someone who needs hope, healing, or strength today. Red heart. Then my grandfather set his fork down. The sound was quiet, almost polite, but somehow it cut through the room sharper than a shout. He didn't raise his voice when he spoke. He didn't need to. "Lena," he said, looking directly at me, "are you still paying off the loan I helped secure for you?" The word loan hit my chest like a dropped plate. I felt my lungs forget how to work. Every face turned toward me. The warmth drained from the table. The candles flickered, as if even they had sensed something was wrong. My voice came out thin. "Grandpa, I don't have a loan." My mother's wine glass tipped, spilling red across the white tablecloth like a slow bleed. My father's smile fractured, the corners twitching as if his face couldn't decide what expression to wear anymore. My grandfather, Arthur Hale, hadn't been home for Christmas in nearly a decade. He traveled constantly, business, boardrooms, private clinics, places my parents spoke about in hushed, resentful admiration. They always said he preferred distance, that he hated family gatherings. That was a lie, because the way he looked at me now, confused, protective, wounded, was the look of a man realizing he had been deceived. "What do you mean you don't have a loan?" he asked slowly. I swallowed. My heart pounded loud enough that I was sure everyone could hear it. "I rent a studio," I said, "month to month. I've never taken out a loan. Not for school, not for housing, not for anything." Silence pressed in from every direction. My mother, Marianne, reached for her napkin with shaking hands. My father, Caleb, cleared his throat too many times, as if sound alone might fix this. Arthur's gaze slid from me to them. 3 years ago, he had returned unexpectedly, just like tonight. And 3 years ago, according to my parents, he had done something generous for me, something I was never supposed to know about. The room had been decorated to perfection. A 12-foot tree stood in the corner, trimmed in coordinated whites and silvers. A string quartet recording played softly from hidden speakers. Everything screamed success, stability, control. Everything screamed lies. Arthur leaned back in his chair, fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "Caleb," he said calmly, "Marianne, you told me Lena was repaying the education loan I co-signed. You said she was grateful, responsible, independent." I stared at my parents, my stomach folding in on itself. "Loan." My father laughed, not convincingly. "Dad, this really isn't the moment." Arthur ignored him. He turned back to me. "Lena, sweetheart, have you ever signed paperwork for a private loan? Anything connected to your name?" My mouth went dry. "No," I said. "I wouldn't even qualify. My credit's barely." I stopped, because suddenly pieces shifted in my memory. Notices I didn't understand. A rejected apartment application 2 years ago. A credit score drop no bank would explain clearly. Arthur went very still. "What credit score?" he asked. I hesitated, then answered honestly. "Low. Lower than it should be. I thought it was a mistake." My mother's breath hitched. Arthur stood. At 79, he moved more slowly than he used to, his cane tapping softly against the floor. But when he rose from that chair, the room bent toward him. Power doesn't leave a man just because time touches his spine. "Living room," he said, "not a request, Guests shifted uncomfortably, some pretending to check their phones, others suddenly fascinated by the tree. One by one, they quietly excused themselves, sensing that this wasn't their family drama to witness. I followed Arthur into the living room. My parents trailed behind us like children headed to the principal's office. Arthur sat in his leather chair near the fireplace, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "Lena," he said gently, "tell me where you live." I wrapped my arms around myself. "A converted studio near East Alder. The heater breaks. The landlord doesn't fix things. And your job?" "Junior visual designer. Contract-based." My father scoffed. "She exaggerates." Arthur turned his head slowly. "Do not speak," he said. The room went dead silent. Arthur looked back at me. "You've never received money from me?" I shook my head. His jaw tightened. "3 years ago," he said quietly, "I authorized a $180,000 private education and housing loan. It was issued under your name with my collateral. Your parents assured me you requested it and were managing payments responsibly." My blood ran cold. "I never signed anything," I whispered. Arthur closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. He looked at my parents. "Explain," he said. My mother's voice trembled. We were helping her. She didn't understand how these things work." "You forged her signature," Arthur said flatly. My father stood abruptly. "We did what was necessary." Arthur rose again, slamming his cane once against the floor. "You destroyed your daughter's financial future to fund your comfort," he said, "and you lied to me to do it." My hands shook. My credit, my rejections, my constant struggle. It hadn't been bad luck. It had been theft. Arthur turned to me, his eyes softening with regret, so deep it hurt to look at. "I trusted them," he said, "and because of that, you paid the price." Tears blurred my vision. He faced my parents once more. "Tomorrow morning," he said, 9 o'clock. "We meet my attorney. Bring everything. Loan documents, statements, every record." My father's face drained of color. "And if you don't," Arthur continued quietly, "I will pursue this as fraud." The fire crackled behind him. Christmas was over, and for the first time in my life, I understood something terrifying and freeing at the same time. My struggle had never been accidental. I didn't sleep. I lay on my mattress, half bed, half couch, listening to the radiator rattle like it was coughing itself awake. Every sound felt louder than usual. The drip from the ceiling, the hum of the streetlight outside my cracked window, my phone face down on the table, heavy with everything it now represented. A loan I never asked for, a debt I never signed, a life quietly sabotaged, while I blamed myself for not trying hard enough. At exactly 7:58 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Arthur Hale, I'm downstairs." My heart jumped into my throat. I threw on my coat, barely noticing the loose button, and hurried down the narrow stairwell. The paint peeled in long strips from the walls. Someone's trash bag had split open near the landing, the smell sharp and sour. When I pushed open the front door, he was standing there. Arthur looked out of place in the way only powerful men do when they step into places built for survival instead of comfort. His coat was dark wool, immaculate. His cane rested lightly in his hand. Snow dusted his shoulders. His eyes moved slowly over the building. He didn't say anything at first. Then, quietly, almost to himself, he said, "They told me you lived comfortably." I swallowed. "It's temporary." He looked at me, not angry, not judgmental, just sad. "Show me," he said. The stairwell creaked under our weight as we climbed. I avoided the step that dipped inward, the one I always warned guests about. Not that I had many. When we reached my door, my hand hovered over the knob. I'd never felt embarrassed about this place before. Not really. I told myself it was practical, a stepping stone. But standing there with Arthur behind me, I felt exposed in a way I couldn't explain. I opened the door. The apartment smelled faintly of cleaning spray and damp plaster. The bucket sat beneath the window, catching slow drips from last night's rain. My drafting desk was cluttered with sketches, invoices, overdue notices I hadn't bothered hiding. Arthur stepped inside, like he was entering sacred ground. He touched the wall where the paint bubbled. He stared at the window sealed with tape. His eyes lingered on the thin blanket folded over the mattress. "You live alone?" he asked. I nodded. "For how long?" "Since college." He didn't ask about help or support. He already knew the answer. Arthur walked toward my desk, picking up a letter addressed to me. His brow furrowed. "Collections," he asked softly. I hesitated. I thought it was a mistake. They said I'd defaulted on a private loan. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his hands were trembling, not with age, but with fury. "They used your identity," he said. "They took a loan under your name and let it rot." Something inside me finally broke open. "I thought I was bad with money," I said, my voice cracking. "I thought I didn't deserve better housing, that I had messed something up so badly no one would explain it to me." Arthur turned sharply. "You were lied to." I laughed once, bitter. "That's been my whole life." He stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Pack a bag," he said. I blinked. "What?" "You're not staying here tonight." "Arthur, This is not charity," he said firmly. "This is correction." I didn't argue. We drove in silence to his attorney's office, the city waking up around us. Cars honked. People rushed past sidewalks with coffees and headphones, completely unaware that my entire reality had shifted overnight. The office sat on the 12th floor of a glass building overlooking the river. Clean, bright, unforgiving. My parents were already there. They stood when we entered. My mother's eyes were swollen. My father's jaw was tight, defensive. "Lena," my mother said weakly. I didn't answer. Arthur took his seat at the head of the conference table. I sat beside him. Across from us, my parents looked smaller than I'd ever seen them. The attorney, Marcus Ellery, didn't waste time. "We've reviewed the documents," he said, opening a thick folder. The private loan was issued under Lena Hale's name, using Arthur Hale's assets as collateral. My father interrupted. "She benefited from it." "No," Marcus said calmly. "She didn't." He slid papers across the table. These funds were deposited into an account controlled by Caleb and Marianne Hale. Payments were made inconsistently. The account defaulted after 18 months. My mother whispered, "We meant to fix it." Arthur leaned forward. Silence. Marcus continued. "The loan impacted Lena's credit score, rental eligibility, and employment background checks." I felt sick. My father slammed his hand on the table. "She doesn't understand how expensive life is." Arthur's voice was low. "You stole from your daughter." "We borrowed." "You forged her signature." Arthur said, "That's fraud." My mother started crying. We didn't think she'd ever find out. That sentence landed harder than anything else. "You didn't think I mattered enough to notice." Marcus cleared his throat. "There is a resolution available. Full assumption of the loan by Caleb and Marianne. Immediate correction of credit records. And," he paused, glancing at Arthur, "transfer of assets to compensate for damages." My father stiffened. "What assets?" Arthur didn't raise his voice. "The coastal townhouse," he said. "The one you registered under a holding company." My mother gasped. "You can't." "I can," Arthur said. "And I will." My father stood. You're choosing her over us. Arthur looked at him steadily. I'm choosing honesty, he said. You stopped qualifying a long time ago. I watched their faces crumble, not from remorse, but from fear. Fear of consequences. Marcus slid one final document across the table. Sign, he said, or we proceed legally. My parents signed, hands shaking, eyes hollow. When it was over, Arthur stood and offered me his arm. As we walked out, I didn't look back. That night, I slept in a guest room overlooking the river. The bed didn't sag. The heat worked. The silence felt foreign. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing something for the first time. I wasn't behind in life. I had been held back. And now, the people who did it were finally paying attention. I didn't hear from my parents for 3 days after the meeting. No calls, no messages, no apologies. That silence told me more than any confession ever could. On the 4th morning, Arthur sat across from me at the kitchen island, sunlight pouring through the glass wall behind him. He looked tired, not weak, just worn down by the kind of disappointment that settles into bones. They're scrambling, he said, stirring his coffee, trying to protect what they can. I nodded. They always do. He studied me carefully. Are you ready for what comes next? I thought about the years I'd blamed myself, the apartments I'd been rejected from, the interviews that went nowhere because of financial inconsistencies, the nights I'd eaten noodles and told myself struggle built character. Yes, I said, I'm ready. Arthur nodded once. Good, because today we stopped letting them control the story. Marcus Ellery's office felt different this time. Not clinical, deliberate. My parents sat together on one side of the table, hands linked so tightly it looked painful. My mother's eyes darted constantly. My father stared straight ahead, jaw locked. Arthur and I sat opposite them. Marcus placed 3 folders on the table. One, he said, tapping the first, is the corrected loan assumption. Caleb and Marianne Hale are now solely responsible for the full balance. My father swallowed. 2, Marcus continued, is the formal affidavit acknowledging identity misuse. This is required to restore Lena's credit history. My mother's breath hitched. And 3, Marcus said, pausing, is the restitution agreement. My father finally spoke. Restitution for what? For damages, Marcus replied evenly. Financial, professional, and emotional. Emotional. That word seemed to land last. Marcus opened the 3rd folder and slid the document forward. Transfer of the coastal townhouse into Lena Hale's name. He read, effective immediately. My mother let out a small, broken sound. That house, she whispered. That's our retirement. Arthur's voice was calm but unyielding. You funded it with her identity. My father stood, abruptly. This is punishment. No, Arthur said. This is accountability. He turned to me. Lena, tell them. My throat tightened, but I spoke. I didn't ask for luxury. I said quietly, I asked for a fair start. You took that from me, and you watched me struggle without saying a word. My father's face twisted. We did what parents are supposed to do. We taught you resilience. No, I said, you taught me silence. The room went still. My mother started crying openly now. We were afraid you'd leave us. I laughed softly. You lost me long before this. Marcus cleared his throat. You can sign, or we proceed with criminal charges. My father's shoulders sagged. He signed. My mother followed. The pen shook in her hand. The townhouse transfer was finalized within 48 hours. It sat on a bluff overlooking the water, white stone exterior, floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood in the empty living room the first time alone, keys cold in my palm. This wasn't triumph. It was reclamation. Every wall felt like a receipt for something I'd survived. Arthur stood beside me, quiet. They never expected consequences, he said. People like that rarely do. The final meeting came a week later, not at the office, at Arthur's private boardroom. My parents arrived, stiff, guarded, clearly expecting another lecture. They didn't expect this. Arthur stood at the head of the table, cane resting against his chair. "I've revised my estate plan," he said plainly. My father's eyes widened. "You already—" "This isn't about money," Arthur interrupted. "This is about trust." He slid a single document across the table. "I am removing you," he said, looking directly at my father, "as executor of anything tied to my name." My father surged forward. "You can't." "I can," Arthur said. "And I have." My mother whispered, "What about us?" Arthur's voice softened, but only slightly. "You will receive what you've already taken. Nothing more." Silence roared. Then Arthur did something unexpected. He turned to me. "Lena," he said, "this next part is your decision." I blinked. "Mine." "You can pursue further action," he said. "Civil damages, public records, or you can walk away now, with everything restored." I looked at my parents, at my mother's fear, at my father's anger, at the people who had rewritten my life without my consent. "I'm done being tied to them," I said. Arthur nodded. "Then we end it here." Marcus closed his folder. "This concludes all proceedings." My parents didn't look relieved. They looked hollow, as if the fight had drained out of them, leaving only the truth behind. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. Arthur walked slowly beside me. "You handled that with grace," he said. I shook my head. "No, I handled it with clarity." He smiled at that. That night, alone in the townhouse, I sat on the floor with my back against the glass wall, watching the water reflect the moonlight. For the first time, my thoughts weren't about survival. They were about direction. I opened my laptop and began drafting plans, not for revenge, not for escape, but for rebuilding, because the most painful truth I'd learned wasn't that my parents betrayed me. It was that I'd spent years believing I deserved it, and that belief, that was finally gone. The silence after everything settled was strange. Not heavy, not tense, just unfamiliar. For most of my life, silence meant something was wrong. It meant waiting for criticism, bracing for disappointment, preparing myself to be smaller. But now, sitting alone in the townhouse with the water stretching endlessly beyond the glass, silence felt like space, like permission. Arthur stayed with me for the first few nights. He didn't hover. He didn't give advice unless I asked. He simply existed nearby, reading in the mornings, watching the water in the evenings, occasionally telling stories that had nothing to do with money or business. Stories about mistakes, about people he trusted who disappointed him, about how success doesn't make you immune to betrayal. It just makes the betrayal more expensive. One evening, as we sat by the window, he spoke without looking at me. "You know," he said, "when people hurt you and call it love, it rewires something inside you." I nodded. "It makes you question your instincts." "It makes you question your worth," he corrected gently. That landed deep. I didn't tell anyone about the townhouse at first. Not coworkers, not acquaintances, not even distant relatives. I needed time to live in my life without defending it. I converted the smaller bedroom into a workspace. White walls, wide desk, clean light. For the first time, I designed without rushing, without fear that one mistake would undo everything. Clients came slowly at first, then more steadily. I gravitated toward people who reminded me of myself, those who needed warmth more than luxury, function more than flash. Single parents, Students. People starting over after loss. I undercharged. Sometimes I didn't charge at all. It felt right. Arthur watched quietly. "You're building something," he said one morning. "So, are you?" I replied, noticing the way he smiled at that. My parents didn't reach out. Weeks passed, then months. I thought I would feel something about that. Anger, grief, maybe even relief. But mostly I felt clarity. They hadn't loved me the way I needed. That truth didn't require punishment anymore. It required distance. And distance, I learned, is not cruelty. It's care. Arthur's health declined in late spring. Nothing dramatic. Just a slowing. Shorter walks. Longer rests. I visited every day. Some afternoons we talked. Some afternoons we didn't. He liked knowing I was there, even when words weren't necessary. Once, while dozing, he squeezed my hand. "Promise me something," he murmured. "Anything. Don't let what they did make you hard." I swallowed. "I won't." "Good," he said. "Strength without softness is just another kind of damage." Those were the last clear words he spoke to me. After he passed, I returned to the townhouse alone. Grief came in waves, not sharp, not dramatic, just steady, honest. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen. Chosen by someone who saw me clearly and didn't ask me to shrink to be loved. On the first Christmas after everything, I stayed home. No chandelier, no performance, no pretending, just white lights, quiet music, and 2 mugs by the fireplace. One for me, one for Arthur. I stood by the window, watching snow fall gently over the water, and I thought about how close I'd come to believing the lie that my life was supposed to be smaller, that my struggle was proof of my failure, that love had to hurt to be real. None of that was true. Here's what I learned, what I carry with me now. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people who benefit most from your silence. And revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes revenge is refusing to carry their shame any longer. It's building a life where you no longer need their approval to feel whole. It's choosing peace over proximity. I didn't win because I inherited something. I won because I stopped believing I deserved less. And that choice, that's the one thing no one can ever take from me again.